So I like to start off with when I can really remember my story starting. That was when I was around age 10, and we had just moved from, a huge like I had friends all down the street, and just tons of friends. I loved Missouri. The weather was great. The fireflies were awesome. And then we moved to a small, very dry town in Colorado. And I mean, I had maybe two friends in the whole town, and one was super busy all the time, and the other one was in trouble all the time, I should say. So, it was quite a change. Um, but then I noticed I started getting these weird twitches. My arm would twitch and my hand would flutter, and I just kind of play it off like playing with my hair. And then the next thing, my forearms and my calves started hurting like crazy. They would cramp. I'd get Charlie horses really bad that just would not release. They'd be so sore that like I would do ace bandages around my arms and legs and hide them under my clothes to go to school. And at first we thought that maybe it was just growing pains and that I'd be tall like my dad. And I'm not. That did not happen. Um, we really didn't put too much thought into it until probably I was 14, and the twitching had moved from one arm to both arms, both legs, and my head. And the cramping never went away. It just got worse. And then my back started cramping, and then I started getting nerve pain and insomnia and OCD and anxiety and depression and a lot of pain. And it was really starting to affect my daily life. And so we finally decided to go see some doctors about it. And the first one was pretty close, but he left practice. Like as soon as we saw him, he was done with practice. So we didn't really get any answers. And we would continue on this journey of trying to find answers with all the tests and all the pharmaceutical trials. And then we started trying alternative medicines and anything without a diagnosis. We had no idea what was going on. And it would take until I was 18 to finally get the diagnosis of myoclonus dystonia, which is a rare neurological movement disorder. And by that time, we'd already tried all the medications and alternative therapies. And the doctor who diagnosed me said, "We just learned about this illness. It is so rare. No one in the clinic has ever seen a person with it, not even my colleagues.
Wow.
And even as of last year, when I looked it up, it's estimated to be less than 1 in a million people have it." At 18, I was kind of on my own. And during this time of dealing with this illness, I was also experiencing metaphysical and paranormal activity. So I would see auras, which was really cool for a while. My one of my friends that she was just really busy. She was this pure-hearted go-getter, like type A personality, had to be the best in class, best in swim, best at everything. And it did her well. She ended up with a full ride scholarship, but we
Wow.
were in theater together. And I remember before she went on stage, I just saw this huge blue aura with gold sparkles. And it was
Wow.
just the most amazing aura I'd ever seen, and it fits her to a T. Like that's she was just a very full-hearted person. So I'd seen different color auras on people, and my mom kind of helped me learn how to grow that skill. And she was always kind of the metaphysical guide in the background, even though we were going to church that didn't really believe in the metaphysical or paranormal activities too much. But there was some really scary parts to the paranormal. It started off with ghosts, which were not scary. They didn't bug me. I didn't bug them. It was just kind of, if you have a plant in your room, it's not going to bug you. You're not going to bug it, just it was there. So I saw a few ghosts, and then I started seeing these dark entities. And there's one that I didn't know was actually well known around the world until I wrote my book and did a little more research on it. And I call him the top hat Cape Shadow Man, because what else do you call him? My sister called him the party ghost. because loved to show up when there were many people. But he's well known around the world for being a dark entity showing up to children in basements. And that's every time he showed up, it was when my sister and I were young in basements. So I would see him, my friends would see him, my sister saw him, my sister's friend saw him. My sister and I never told each other, but we both told my mom. So my mom knew that we were both seeing this entity.
Wow.
And my sister and I didn't learn that each other had seen this for quite a while.
What did
Um,
your mom tell you guys when you individually told her?
I think she was always just trying to stay one step ahead with research, trying to figure out what it was, um, what it could be. That's when we found out that the previous tenants, their kids had played with an Ouija board in the basement
Mhm.
and had probably opened up a portal. So she found that out. And, we were always like, is that what's causing my nightmares? Because I had horrific nightmares when I could sleep. But even, gosh, at age 12, I was only sleeping 10, 11, 12. I was only sleeping a couple hours a night. And that progressed to no hours a night for days.
Mm.
So I'd have advanced insomnia. And when I did sleep, I was plagued with horrific nightmares. One thing that still freaks me out to this day was a doll that we had, like a generational doll that was really old in our guest bedroom. And one night it turned its head and its eyes glowed red and it looked at me. And I freaked out. I was like, that's not normal. We found out a well-respected cowboy in our church also saw a doll move in front of him, and he moved his whole family out of the house within a week.
Wow.
So that at least gave me some validation that I'd actually seen what I saw.
Were you questioning anything that you were like seeing and experiencing because of your lack of sleep? Maybe I'm seeing all this because I'm not getting enough sleep. Am I going crazy? Like, did any of that run through your mind?
At the time, I wasn't too tired, even though I wasn't sleeping. So kind
Interesting.
of, I think that's kind of also a thing with myoclonus dystonia is the brain is so hyperactive that even though I had extreme insomnia, I could function like a normal person
Wow.
with a relatively normal amount of energy. Um, so the hallucinations didn't come into a thought until my early 20s. But when I was a kid, I was like, like am I really seeing this? Is this really
Mhm.
happening? Especially, the church, I was told don't tell anyone at the church. Um, if you're saved, you shouldn't see this stuff and, all this. So, just trying to dissect what was actually happening was really, just kind of, it was hard, but it was also kind of a second thought because I was also like, what's going on with my body? And then, of course, I'm a young girl going through puberty without all my friends. And so that added another layer. So I had to worry about school. I was bullied. I was an outsider. Like it was the old small town feel. Like you had to have been there. Your parents, grandparents had to have been there forever, or you don't fit in. So I was an outcast, so I had to deal with bullying, and then I was hiding all these symptoms from everybody, and not sleeping, and then experiencing the paranormal stuff. So it was kind of the last thought. So I get to high school and um, ask my parents to go to a different town because I could not take the bullying anymore. And my goal was to blend into the walls. And I went to a different high school. I loved it. I blended into the walls and, did things behind the scenes that were really cool. But the whole time my illness was progressing and, we tried different, still trying different medications at this point. Nothing is really helping. So I get diagnosed at 18 without much, like we don't know what to do. And so I'm kind of left to my own. And when I was probably 15, I had this deep inherent sense of knowing I was going to die before I reached the age of 28. And
Hmm.
because I knew I was going to die before I reached 28, I'm like, I'm going to live my life to the fullest. Even though the doctor said you can't swim because if you have a non-epileptic myoclonic seizure, which I had tons of, while you're swimming, you could drown. You can't ride a motorcycle, you can't drive. if you have this, you have this episode, you could crash. You can't go skiing, which my family loved to ski because you might twitch off the chairlift. You can't, the list of things you can't do was immense. And I said, you're telling me I can't live in order not to die? No, I disregarded all of their recommendations. And I lived as fully as I could. I started driving motorcycles. I was rock climbing. I loved rock climbing. I played drums. Drums actually really helped with the myoclonus dystonia because my energy had somewhere to go. And um, I skydived. I skied. I snowboarded. I whitewater rafted. I kayaked down whitewater. I mean, nothing stopped me.
I
I,
love it.
even though I hurt, I had very little energy and I didn't sleep. I did not stop living my life. Like
Mm.
I'm like, if I have this limited time, I'm going to experience all of it.
Yes.
So I buy a house at 19 to flip it, and I'm going to college, also working as a waitress to support myself while dealing with this illness. And then I start astro traveling involuntarily, and I hated it. I was always chased by these dark entities in these other dimensions, and I'd have no control over when I left my body or not. And that was a whole nother crazy thing. And I really, really hated that. And I still saw some dark entities and apparitions and stuff, just different ones. And, I was just trying to live a normal life, and didn't put much thought into the metaphysical or, I definitely didn't do any research. And then I reached 25 and I am just tired. My body hurts, my mind hurts, my heart hurts. Because of my illness and everything, I didn't have a lot of self-love, self-worth. And because of that, I had not very nice men enter my life because I was vulnerable and I didn't love myself. So I did not attract the right kind of men. So, I was also just broken in that aspect too. Um, so I was going to originally sell my house, use the equity to get a better house, flip that and keep going up. But at this point, I'm exhausted. So I took the equity and I basically decided to run away to go die because I knew death was coming. And so I moved 1,400 miles away from my friends and family and found a beautiful apartment in a beautiful part of the state. And I didn't know how I was going to die. I just knew it was coming. And so I did my best to keep living life. I did a lot of cave exploration and spelunking and hiking and wandering around. And I spent a lot of time at the pool because it's really easy to spend time at the pool when you don't have energy. So, and my insomnia is absolutely insane at this point. 3, 4 days with zero sleep. I can usually handle 2, maybe 3 days without sleep pretty well. You probably wouldn't notice. Um, where a lot of people are like, I had the worst night. I only got 4 hours of sleep. It's like, yeah, I haven't slept in 3 days. And
Mm.
I'm still bubbly and I can still work. Up until this, I was working on a career and I just took a year off because I didn't know what was going to happen. But I'm not sleeping, so I'm exhausted. I'm still having nightmares. My myoclonus dystonia is still progressing. They have no prognosis. They have no means of helping me. And then I come down with the flu. And this was after we tried spirit release therapy because my mom thought, well, we've tried all these things and she was always researching. She never gave up. And because the portal was probably opened in our house in that small town, and I was plagued with these entities and nightmares, and then this really weird, unknown, rare condition. She'd heard, sometimes entities can attach and cause these weird illnesses. Let's try spirit release therapy. I'm like, all right, well, nothing's hurt in the past. Pharmaceuticals hurt, but, alternative medicines never hurt. They never did damage. So we started down this journey virtually, and I got really sick. I ended up coming down with the flu, and I couldn't keep water down. I couldn't keep food down. And I'm just getting weaker and weaker. And this goes on for a few weeks. What am I? I'm not going to go to the doctor. They've dismissed me my whole life. And then, was it caused by this, spirit release therapy? Do I have a, physical bug? I don't know. How am I going to tell a doctor that?
Yeah.
And what are they going to do? So I get really, really sick on top of the myoclonus dystonia and the insomnia. And now I've got the flu where I'm not even getting nutrition or water into my body. And that brings us to April 27th, 2017.
So, okay. I just over the years I've heard various and numerous NDE stories, and I had heard not many, but a few where people experience some form of what they would call hell. And from all of the ones that I have heard, it never like ended there. All of them ended up like going to the void, the light. They all ended up having um an experience after their experience in hell that was much more in line with all the other NDEs I had heard. I did not realize that that is called distressing NDEs. I didn't realize there was a term for it. So your NDE is technically labeled a distressing NDE. Is that right?
I do fit into the distressing NDE just because the weeks leading up to my actual heart stopping with the spirit release therapy, I had stuff attached to me, and I would say very demonic and very dark. And the more we tried to release it, because it had been attached so long, the angrier and more vicious they got. And I ended up being attacked mentally and physically, leading up to my NDE. So I experienced hell on earth before my NDE. So while my NDE was not distressing, leading up to it was. So I still fit into kind of the umbrella of the distressing near death experiences.
Very interesting. Okay, so let's go from there. I just wanted everyone to know that that was even like a thing because they're rare.
Estimated about 10 to 15% of people in the world have a near death experience, and only about 10% of those have a distressing. And because I am part of the distressing experiencers, there are unfortunately people who came back to their body before they got to experience something better than their hellish experience,
Oh,
which is very traumatizing. But the majority of the people I know have been able to, experience the beautiful side of it. Ones that have come back without getting out of a hellish experience have a really hard time talking about it, even harder than it is to already talk about these NDEs. But I've been part of 4 research papers actually by people in the medical field, in psychology field, and all of that about distressing experiences. So they are trying to do more research about NDEs and these distressing experiences. But most, a lot of the people who have made it out, actually every single person I know who has made it out, realized that hell was of their own creation, and all they had to do to get out was ask to get out, which falls perfectly into what happened in my NDE. It's you create your own reality. Left off on April 27th, 2017, and this is weeks after having the flu, whether it be spiritual or a bug, these demonic attacks that started off at very mental. And then I realized, you know what, they feed off my fear. I'm going to stop fearing them. And when I stopped doing that, it became physical. They started giving me hallucinations, which was probably pretty easy because I was already exhausted, which just made me more terrified. And at 2 in the morning, days of no sleep. I'd been on the phone with my mom almost 24 hours a day for these days. My dad even was told by God that I was under demonic attack. My parents knew I was going downhill, and they booked a flight to come see me, but it was a few days out. And I'm on the phone with my mom at 2 in the morning, and I know she needs some sleep. She does not function without sleep like I do. I mean, I don't know anyone else who functions without sleep like I do. And so I told her I was going to try to get some sleep, and I hung up because I knew she needed to try to get some sleep. even though I knew sleep wasn't coming. I didn't know what was, but I said goodnight. And when I hung up the phone, I I was done. I was exhausted. And I can't even tell you the level of exhaustion. It was physical, of course, but mental, it was emotional, and I didn't know at the time, spiritual. I was exhausted on every essence of my being. And from that, I wasn't sure necessarily who God was or what he was. Um, Even though I grew up in a Christian church, things just didn't add up. And I cried out. I said, I can't do this anymore. It's in your hands. And I didn't say it verbally, but I said it with every essence of every fiber of every particle of my being. And in that exact moment, everything stopped. The demonic things had felt like I kind of saw them ripped away from me. My pain went away. My like the voices that were going like crazy in my head went away. It was calm. It's like stadiums had been silenced, boulders had been lifted, and it was the first time in my life I felt complete serenity and peace. And here I am just laying in my bed, and I'm just, oh my, like in awe and just peace and serenity, and it's beautiful. And then I hear a voice, "Are you ready?" I didn't hesitate to say yes. I didn't take time to think about what he was asking, what I was ready for, or anything. I'm like, something just answered me, like just came to save me. Yes, I'm ready, whatever it is. And that is when I felt these like huge, enormous thumps on my chest. It didn't hurt, or in my chest kind of, and didn't hurt, but it was just a lot of pressure. And in an instant after those three, I was completely separated from my body. I was then in this blackness with no recollection of Brianna, of Bree, of Earth, of humanity, or anything. I was just energy and energy. And it was blackness, but it was full of every possibility. It was full of every beginning, every, just absolutely everything. And in this space, I met God or the creator or source, and basically the energy that came to save me. And there was no judgment, there was no fear, there was no anger. It was just pure, immense love. And it was so incredible. I'm getting goosebumps just remembering it right now. And it was like this kind of swirling, massive energy. And I just knew I was home. And it was absolutely incredible. Even though I was not aware of Bree or being a human or Earth, my consciousness knew enough that something had changed that I just had the thought, am I dead?
Hmm.
Not scared, just like, am I dead? And out of the darkness, three monks appear. And I don't know why they're monks, but they're sitting cross-legged, just floating in front of me, smiling, as if to say, if you only knew. And I was like, that answers nothing. Okay, curious. I wasn't upset about it or anything. I was just like, okay. And they float back into the darkness. 5 years later, after this experience, I would realize they were kind of laughing and chuckling because death is not a thing. And I asked if I was a thing that could not exist because death does not exist. So it took me 5 years to figure that one out. Um, but after they float back into the blackness, I end up in this amazing tunnel, bright blue, white, kind of like at the middle. There we go, like kind of that, except for even like more bright and bold and neon and amazing. And it's surrounded with ones and zeros, and I'm going at a supersonic speed. And as I'm going through it, I'm getting downloaded with this incredible information. I wasn't aware of what the information was, just that it was incredible and it would come to me when I needed it. So after the tunnel, I end up in a white space, basically the opposite of the blackness. There wasn't much in there. It was a pile of numbers in front of me and an ascended master teacher behind me. And I didn't see who was behind me, so I have no idea. But in front of me, this is the only time I looked like a human at all in my experience. I remember picking up this pile of numbers, huge black numbers, and throwing them up in the air and exclaiming, "No wonder you love creating," because I realized the universe was created in math. And I still don't know why I thought that was so exciting. I then go into the next place I'm going to spend the majority of my experience. And this place has a ton of other beings, like probably thousands. And it's kind of reminiscent of Earth. There's buildings, there's streets, there's utility poles, there's even a grocery store, there's trees, all of this. And this part of my experience is when I get to play and I get to learn so much. I think the beginning of my experience, I saw these other beings sliding down trees covered in snow. And that's when I thought, I like snow. And then instantly I'm sliding down these moss covered trees next to these other beings sliding down trees next to me. And I realized, oh, if I like the green trees and they like the snow trees, maybe they're sliding down the snow trees and we're experiencing these own separate realities separately together, like, but it wasn't this huge conundrum. It was just like, oh, that's so cool. And it made a lot of sense. There's some beings working in the grocery, I'd say working. They're just, organizing a grocery store, some working on a machine, just some walking around, some flying. And I never got the feeling of where these beings came from. If they had, come from Earth, if they had come from other planets, other dimensions, other universes, they were just souls. And the fact that we could change our body, like what we look like, because we're just energy, does not help because we didn't have a, uniform look. I personally had three different bodies in this experience.
Wow.
I I looked like them for a certain point of time. I was a snowman. Yes, I understand the irony. I just said I didn't like snow. And I was also like in this kind of robotic body. So, our bodies were just very fluid and interchangeable. Speaking of when I was a snowman, I had the thought of these two beings were working on a machine that had a huge flame coming out the top of it, the side of it. And I was like, if I get too close, will I melt? Well, instantly I am underneath it and melted a puddle of eyeballs. But there's no pain, there's no fear, I'm not scared. It's just like, huh, I wonder if anyone will put me back together. Sure enough, just like that, beams came back and put me back together and I'm away from the flame. There was a time when, you know, the beams and I kind of got out of the store and we all started dancing. And we danced in perfect unison as if we'd choreographed for millennia. And no one ever said a word. And things just happened so instantaneous. It was just thoughts happened instantly. And we moved as one, as if we just were one, but also like individual. It was very, it's, I don't know how else to describe it. We're very much individuals, but we still can communicate and move as one.
Like how dolphins are, how they're individuals, but
Yeah.
how they are able to synchronize
Yeah.
the way that they do. Yeah. Yeah. Very
Yeah,
much what you're
exactly. That's
saying.
great. I've
Yeah.
never heard that analogy. I love it. Or, swarms of fish, they don't
Yes.
communicate and yet they go together, or birds even.
Yes.
Um, oh, that's a great analogy. That's exactly how it felt. Another really favorite part of my experience, which will come into play after my experience, is when I was in this robotic body and I was trying to learn how to fly, and I was terrible at it, and I severed my arm on a utility pole. Once again, no pain, no fear. I was just like, oh, what's going to happen? And I watch it grow back together with binary code. And I was like, that's cool. And those are probably the biggest parts of this realm or dimension I was in, even though it went on forever and there was so much more. But then we get to the last part of this experience where I'm with the beams and there's a barbed wire fence and beyond it is blurry, but I knew that it was probably like a higher frequency, higher dimension, just somewhere even cooler and better.
Hmm.
And I just knew I couldn't go with them. Not all of these beams were going through the fence. into the beyond, but I just knew I couldn't go with them. And then I end up in the last part of my experience in kind of, it felt like a small, dark room with seven magnificent beings behind me, not as amazing as, God or Source in the first one, but more so than the Master Center Teacher in the white space. They're somewhere in between. And there, I didn't see them, but I felt that there were seven. And in front of
Hmm.
me is this scroll as big as I was, and on it was this beautiful golden script. And it was revealing, I wish I knew what, because that's when my ego decided to come back in. And basically, what happened was like, no, we're not. The script went away, the scroll rolled up, and that's when I was snapped back into my body. And I felt my heart start again. Immediately when I got back, so I still didn't know what had happened, but my consciousness knew my physical body had died. Because when I came back, the first thing I wanted was to go back to wherever I was. I realized I was back in this human body. I didn't want to be there. So I tried surrendering again. I tried deep breathing. I tried meditation. I tried self-hypnosis. Then I tried begging. I just did not want to be back in this body. And I refused to open my eyes because I knew I was back in this body and I just wanted to go back so bad. And after I couldn't go back, then I realized, oh my God, I'm back in this body and I have been dead for 2 months. And then I start freaking out like, oh my gosh, my parents must have found me. They disregarded my wishes to be cremated. They buried me. This is how people get buried alive. Oh my gosh, like all this stuff is going through my head, and I get like a panic attack because I am positive I am gonna open my eyes to be in a top fit. Like I refused to move because I didn't want to feel my coffin around. I was terrified. I was like, oh my God, I'm gonna have to figure out how to get out of this coffin and out of 6 feet of dirt and all of this stuff. Like I was absolutely petrified. But then um eventually body things kicked in and I had to use the bathroom. I had to pee. I was like, well, I guess I gotta open my eyes and figure out what I'm dealing with. And I opened my eyes and I'm still in my bed. And then I was like, okay, has it been a few weeks? Where are my parents? What's going on? And I look at my phone and it's 2:08. I'm like, well, is it 2:08 and a week from when I remember? Is it 2:08 a few days from when I remember? And I looked and it was 2:08 the same day. And I was like, so confused. How could all of that have happened in 8 minutes? Um, which, people are like, well, how do you know it's not a dream? Who dreams that extensive amount of a dream in 8 minutes? Usually you have to have at least a few hours for your brain to get there. And so also I forget my dreams within usually before I even wake up. And this one, it's been 8.5 years, and I remember everything as if I'm going through it right now. That happened, and my mom comes, she gets in the next day, and I start telling her about this crazy experience, because I would just been going through spirit release therapy, and she knew all about my astral travels and the, things I saw. So I was, pretty open with her, and I didn't really know what a near-death experience was. I had, no idea. I didn't have the energy or, care to look things up. But my mom apparently had been learning about them for probably even longer than I was alive
Wow.
because her great grandmother had three near-death experiences. And so
Wow.
she researched metaphysical things and ghosts and entities and auras and, all the stuff and ease. And so she's just sitting here like, you had a near-death experience. I was like, okay, that's silly, but all right. But I'm telling her, these things that happened, and she's just blown away. And I feel like I'm stuffed in a sausage casing. For one, I am super uncomfortable. Two, everything material is freaking me out. Like I kept touching the wall. It was so solid, and I was so confused by the wall.
Huh.
Then we'd go out and drive, and I could hear plants, and I could hear other people's thoughts, and I could feel other people. I could feel their feelings. I could feel their pain. If we drove past a car accident, I could tell where they are hurt and injured. And it was so overwhelming, especially when I started hearing people's negative thoughts, these hateful thoughts and these hateful feelings, and then I'd feel them, and I hated it so much. I actually got really, really depressed. It was so hard on me that I actually tried to take pretty extreme measures to get to back home. That did not end up very well for me. I ended up in a 4-day coma and only had a brief out of body experience where I saw myself in a bed. I did not get to go back and play. I did not get to go back to the love. It was nothing for 4 days. And then I had brain damage that I had to deal with when I woke up from that. So um, after that, I understood that I wasn't allowed to go back.
Mhm.
Um, So then I was like, all right, I've got to be here. I will make the best of it, like I have so far. And so I worked really hard at physical therapy and, just really hard to get back to a physical body that was, operational again. And after that, I, still didn't know what all of it was. My mom suggested I go to an IANDS conference, the International Association for Near-Death Studies. So a year later, my sister and I went to that, and I heard all these amazing stories, all these NDEs of life reviews or seeing past relatives or, these healing marble castles, or meeting Jesus or, all over the white light. And I didn't hear anything about the blackness. Like not a single person I heard talked about the blackness.
Huh.
And the colors were more vivid or the music was more beautiful. And I'm like, I didn't hear any music. And to be honest, the space with the beams was kind of grungy, if I'm honest. It wasn't bad. Like I would go back there in a heartbeat. But compared to all these amazing stories, it was pretty grungy. And so I didn't feel like I connected with any of them. Of course, my sister and I only went for a few days. We didn't go for the whole conference because we didn't know what to expect. Um, and I just knew I wanted to volunteer with hospice because I wanted to be close. One, I wanted to be close to the other side, as close as I could get. And two, because I knew I could hold this authentic energy for them
Mm,
without even having to say anything. I could
mm.
be authentically excited for where they're going. So I volunteered for hospice for 2 years, and in that time, I went back to my career. I had no idea what to do with this information. I didn't know what any of it meant. I didn't even know if I really had a near-death experience. And I just kind of went back to my old life, and I was like, maybe I could do it better. And then I would end up getting brain surgery, experimental brain surgery for myoclonus dystonia in 2022. And that was incredible because my condition was still progressing and I was still trying to make the most out of life, of course. And finally, I had an opportunity and who's excited for brain surgery? Well, someone who's been dealing with a chronic illness for 22 years and has no other option. The day I got the call to schedule the brain surgery was one of the happiest days, like of my mom and I's life, I think.
Oh,
So I was scheduled, and then they said I would have to shave my head and I'd have to be awake for it. I'm like, I don't care. So I
do
played with my hair.
it.
Yep. I dyed it all blue. I did crazy side shave. I just went wild with it for 3 months. And I went in smiling. I came out smiling. And
Mm,
the surgery was pretty successful. And for the first time in my life, I was finally out of survival.
mm.
And then I got this most amazing job offer I didn't even know existed for somebody in my field. And it was a few months after brain surgery. And I was going to be one of three to help bring up this new branch from 0 to 100 million to 500 million within 1, 3, 5 years, meet all these metrics and stuff. I was so excited. Like I had made it, through everything. I made it to the top. It's everything I'd wanted. My mom had a heart to heart with me and said, it's going to be like 70, 80 hours of work a week. You just had brain surgery. I knew that turning that job down was saying goodbye to my career because if I was not going to accept the best possible position, why would I keep going in my career? Like what was the point?
Mm.
And then I freaked out for a month. I grieved. I was like, why did I do this? What has all of this been about? Like, what is going on? And then I did some meditation and self-hypnosis. It was mostly self-hypnosis. I didn't know of any other type of meditation besides mindfulness. Um, and after a couple days of not sleeping, it was really easy to do some help self-hypnosis and get back into this beyond this physical state. And I realized I could ask questions. Should I have gone there? And that path went dark. And I was like, okay, then what am I supposed to do? Do I start a YouTube channel? That goes dark. Um, what am, and I'm trying to explore all these different routes and they all go dark. And then finally, what, do I go live with my parents? They offered to let me come stay and recover with them, and it lights up, and it's
Wow.
beautiful. And they live on the western slope of Colorado, and so there's a scene of mountains and sunshine, and it's all bright. And I was like, okay, that's Montrose, Colorado. And so I go down there. I'm like, but then what the heck am I supposed to do? And there's this river, and there's books being thrown in the river as stepping stones. It's like, are you saying I need to write some books? Really? I'm not a writer. Like I wrote proposals for my career, but that's very different than writing a book. And I was like, all right, I guess I'm writing a book and I'm telling my story because I had not really told my story. I couldn't tell my story in corporate America. You know, um, I didn't want that to affect my reputation, my job, opportunities or anything. Heck, I hid my myoclonus dystonia from my employers as best as I could too. I hid the brain surgery from the people that offered me the job because I didn't want that to get in the way. Um, so it's just a complete change, being very upfront and being my authentic self. So I write my first book and then I do some um, exploration on what am I supposed to do? And I do everything and anything that touches my heart. I house sit, I dog sit, I start, personal chefing because I love cooking. Um, and I've got, some food handler certificates and, some skills behind my belt in that field. And I start catering and I do some marketing on the side, consulting, stuff like that. And then I find a thing called a death doula. And it's like hospice on steroids. I could do anything I wanted with it. And so I get my certificate in being a death doula. And I open my own business. And then I realize tons of people are wanting more spiritual help. And
Mm.
so I was like, okay, I'll be a death and spiritual doula. And then people want help with chronic illness. And so in the meantime, I relearn about Dr. Joe Dispenza. My mom sent me a book in 2019, but I was in such survival. I was working for a huge architecture firm in Georgia. I was going through cancer. I was going through myoclonus dystonia. I was going through insomnia, and I could care less about this guy who healed his back. This chiropractor who healed his own back. It's like, okay, well, I heard people healing themselves with Reiki, and we tried that, and healed themselves with Chinese herbs, and we tried that. Like all this stuff. And I was out of survival. I didn't even read the book. Like I got a little bit into it. I'm like, I don't care. Like it's just another one of those things. But now that I was out of survival, I was like, you know, I wouldn't mind rewriting some programs I wrote out of survival. Some, really unfortunate ones that were still affecting me in
Wow.
my life. And I was like, I want to change my subconscious. I know we can rewire it. And so I start listening to him, I start reading, and he's talking about getting into nowhere, no place, no time, no thing, no body. And I'm like, that's like the blackness I was in my NDE. Like that's something. And so, I start, reading and listening more. I'm, buying his programs. I go to his retreat without a ticket. by the way. Like I just showed up and I was like, I'm getting in. And um, sure enough, I got in, and I love the science he has behind, you know, his processes, but I really love his meditations and where
Mhm.
it takes, because it takes you to a place that I was in with all the possibilities. Like it's blackness, yeah, but every possibility exists there. And that's exactly what he's talking about. I'm like, did he have a near-death experience? So I'm like Googling, trying to figure it out. I'm asking other people who know him better. And it turns out he's never had a near-death experience, and yet he still found his way there to the
Mm.
same place that I was in.
Mhm.
So a few days into the retreat, and I'm just there to rewire some programs that were nasty. I wasn't there to heal. My brain surgery was doing a good enough job. I was living a pretty normal life. And so a few days into it, and I get back into the blackness. I get back into the place I was in. And in the blackness, just like the monks appeared in front of me, so did my brain and my heart. And then pieces of this tunnel come, and it's coming straight from source, from God, and circulating through my heart and my brain. And I'm just like making sure it goes through the grateful, loving heart and going into my brain. And I was like, oh, it's rewiring. It's great. It's great. It's great. And then I'm out of the meditation. I was like, that that was actually rewiring my myoclonus dystonia.
Wow.
So the brain surgery I got for myoclonus dystonia is called a deep brain stimulator, or deep brain stimulation. So I've got wires that go into the deep part of my brain. There's a lead that comes out, and then I've got a computer in my chest and a battery. But I also have a little controller that I can change if I need, up, just all sorts of different settings. And I can also turn it off. Usually any little tweak I could tell within a minute, whether it helps the twitching or the cramping, or, whatever I'm going through, or it makes it worse, or, I turn it off for, let's say imaging, and I start, having a twitch attack or a non-epileptic myoclonic seizure. So I was terrified to turn it off, but I also knew that I could. And I'm saying I could tell within minutes. So myoclonus dystonia had been an all day, everyday thing since at least I was 15 years old. So this is 15 years, then plus an additional 5 years of, symptoms off and on. So the next day, I waited till the next day because I didn't want to go into like a twitching fit, not be able to sleep or anything. So I waited till the next day, and it was 4th of July, which is the US's Freedom Independence Day. And on the 4th of July in the morning at 10 something in the morning, I turned it off. I turned it off in this big conference room, so, surrounded by people who have no idea what I'm doing. I'm there by myself, and I turn it off. And then I wait. And then seconds turn into minutes, that turn into hours, that turn into days, that turn into weeks, that turn into months, that turn into years. And here I
Wow.
am still with no myoclonus dystonia, and it's still off. And that that's where the healing part of when I severed my arm and being without fear, and I saw it grow back with binary code, that code also healed me in real life. And and then Dr. Joe also teaches us that we create our reality. And then that connected with my NDE. That is like I was instantly, creating reality. But here it takes such a long time from our high frequency thoughts and feelings to be pulled into or slowed down into matter. So we have the blessing of time because we have bodies that do hurt, and we do
Right.
have pain, and we do have fear, and think about all the intrusive thoughts we get all the time. And these weird impulses that are hardwired into our body, like standing on, a cliff or a balcony, and you just get that weird urge to jump. Thank goodness that we get to have some time to, change that. So we still absolutely create our reality with our thoughts and our feelings. Um, we can also heal ourselves. We are so powerful. Our thoughts, our feelings, our bodies, our minds, our souls are so absolutely extraordinarily powerful. but we're taught out of it. We're taught out of it with culture, a lot of religions, education, even, you know, all of this stuff takes us away from who we really are. And that's what also widens the veil. Our traumas widen that veil. So the more you get, through your traumas and heal from that, the thinner it gets. The more you step outside of the box of culture and what you've been taught and kind of start breaking down what makes sense and re-trusting your intuition we're taught out of, the thinner the veil.
Yes.
The more you believe your experiences, the thinner the veil. So there's all of these things that thin the veil, and the thinner that veil is, the more access we have to our higher selves, which is the essence of who we are. And in that, there's we're unlimited. We are incredible. And that is something huge I've learned.
Yes.
It's taken me a while, but yeah, it took a long time to heal, understand, accept, and get to where I am. It
Yeah.
was not instantaneous. It was a huge process.
I love it.
I really think, the parts that aren't talked about enough is the fact that we are still human. We are still living in a human
Yes.
experience. We still have these emotions and these traumas and these things that have happened and are going to happen. And we can't just ignore them. You need to process them. And you need to, come at it in a, okay, like you said, okay, now I'm just curious why this is happening, or, curious why this is put in my life, or, what can this teach me? So, instead of just being like, yeah, you just need a great mindset and, just conquer the world, it's a lot deeper than that. And I don't think a lot of people talk enough about we are still human and we still need to go through the human experience, but we do have the possibility to control the simulation and change it. And it's not going to happen instantaneously. I mean, sometimes it does. After the Dr. Joe Dispenza event, I was like, oh, I healed. It wasn't right after, but a decent amount of time, like, oh, I can create my perfect man. And then I start putting this guy in boxes. And a guy comes along and starts checking off all these boxes. Turns out it was the worst possible person for me. It was an it was a repeat of the guides of my past, just with these pretty boxes checked.
Mhm.
What I was wanting, and I was creating this perfect ideal man, and he shows up. But at this time, I'd learned to trust my intuition. I learned to trust a lot more about my life. I'm, confident. Um, still struggling with new health issues, of course, but I was like, that's not me anymore. And so I put that to boots like instantaneously. And he was shocked, but I was like, oh, I had no hard feelings about it at all. I was actually really proud of myself.
Good for you.
Then, sure, I, thought I created this perfect man and came into my life and, was like, oh, no, actually, this is just maybe even a test, and I passed, then the universe did provide me
I
my
love
perfect
it.
man.
I love it.
And I am actually getting married to him. So
Oh my gosh, congratulations. When
thank
did
you.
you get engaged?
Last month.
Oh my gosh. Yay. I'm so happy for you.
Yeah,
Wow.
this has also been a part of my story. So
Yes.
it's a beautiful new start, or a new addition to the story because, here I am creating this perfect man and this guy fits none of those boxes, but he is the absolute perfect person for me and I think I'm the perfect person for him. And it's just
Wow.
because, I trusted the flow and the, intuition and I was creating, I was like, you know what, if it's meant to be, send me somebody that makes sense, that we make each other better
I
and that will support each
love
other in this craziness.
it.
And that's what it took. So
That is
yeah.
awesome.
Yep.
Incredible. Whew. I think I'm gonna go like roll in the grass or hug a tree after this.
Uh, I might go
Ground
jump in the river.
myself. Oh
Uh,
man. Do you have any final words, any advice, anything at all that you want to wrap us up with? This has been beautiful.
Yeah, so I have been in really, really hard spots. I've been through chronic illness. I've been through abuse. I've been through suicidal ideation. I have been through bullying. I've been through a lot. And for the longest time, of course, people would be like, well, it's for a reason. It's for a reason. You can't see that reason when you're going through it and when you're trying to survive. Um, but now that I am on the other side of it, I realize one, you can get to the other side of anything. And two, I got to experience all of that. And I get to experience everything here. So when things are hard, when things are messy, when things are painful, when my health still isn't perfect, when I'm still not, just absolutely rolling in the dough, I get to experience all of it. So changing my mindset from why is this happening to I get to experience this has made a huge, significant shift in my own life and a lot of people I work with.
Bree, this was lovely, and it's 12:12 here. What a great place to end it.
I love your enthusiasm. It has been such a joy. So thank you so much.